Sadie Rourke was 19 years old. She had $17.30 to her name. She spent 11 of them on a school bus nobody else in 3 counties would touch, and that left her with $6.30 and the luck to a wreck. For 9 years, the town of Cane Hollow had been telling the same story about the man who used to drive that bus. They told it the way you tell weather: certain, settled, done, and every single word of it was wrong. The bus sat at the far end of the county road department's backlot, the place the men called the boneyard, behind a chain-link fence gone soft and rusted at the corners. Route 7. A long-nosed bluebird the color of old butter under the rust, both front tires flat, weeds grown up through the frame until it looked less like a machine than a thing the ground was slowly taking back. And in the last light of the day, if you drove the ridge road above it, you could see a single amber lamp glowing in one of the windows. A soft, steady light in a bus that had no driver and no power and no earthly reason to shine. People in Cane Hollow said it was Eli. They said the boy who died on the Dunmore grade never left the seat he was sitting in. They said on quiet evenings you could hear children laughing inside the empty shell, and that the light in the window was a candle nobody had lit. They said the driver had been drunk. They said he took that grade too fast with a load of children behind him, and he killed one of them, and he never paid for it. And then he died 2 years back, with the whole town's blame, still sitting on his chest, and good riddance. But dead men don't laugh. So somebody was in that bus, and before this is over, you are going to wish this town had gone to look a whole lot sooner. If stories like this one matter to you, take a second and subscribe. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We like knowing how far these travel now. Let me tell you about the girl in the bus. Sadie had aged out of foster care 11 weeks before she ever heard of Cane Hollow. That is the phrase they use. Aged out. As if you're a carton of milk, and the state has read the date stamped on you and set you out on the curb. On her 18th birthday, there had been a grocery store cake in a group home in the Flatlands. On the morning after her 19th, there had been nothing at all, because by then, Setex stopped, and the bed was needed, and the door, which had never really been open, was simply closed. She had a duffel bag, a phone with a cracked screen, and a car she was sleeping in, a 1998 Corolla with 190,000 miles and a heater that only worked if she smacked the dash. She had learned young to make herself small, to take up no room, ask for nothing, notice everything. When you grow up handed from house to house, you become a student of doorways. You learn which adults look through you, and which ones look at you, and you learn there are far more of the first kind than the second. She found Cane Hollow because of a surplus auction posted on a state website, the kind of list where counties dump the things they no longer want. Old copiers, a salt truck with a cracked block, filing cabinets by the pallet, and at the very bottom one line she read 3 times before she believed it. Lot 41, decommissioned school bus as scrap. Buyer responsible for removal within 7 days. Minimum bid, $10. $10 for something with a roof and 4 walls and a floor. $10 for a place that would be hers, that no landlord could put her out of, that no caseworker could reassign. She drove 4 hours into the East Tennessee hills with the tank on a quarter, and got there, as the clerk was setting out folding chairs for an auction that drew 6 people and lasted 11 minutes. Nobody bid on Lot 41. The auctioneer read it out, and the room went the particular kind of quiet that isn't boredom. It was the quiet of people deciding not to look at something. So Sadie raised her hand, and because 10 felt like nothing, like a number you could ignore, she said 11. She would think about that extra dollar later. She had wanted it to mean something. She had wanted the man who drove it, whoever he was, to be worth 1 more than nothing. The clerk who took her money was a heavy-set woman named Doreen with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and when Sadie signed the paper, Doreen held on to her end of it a second too long. "You know what that is," Doreen said. "It wasn't a question. A bus," Sadie said. "It's the Route 7 bus, hon." Doreen let go of the paper. "You do what you want with it. But you get it off county property by the end of the week, and I'd advise you don't sleep out there past dark." "Why not?" Doreen looked at her the way you look at someone you've already decided you won't have to think about again. "Just wouldn't," she said, and she put the $11 in the box and pushed the ledger closed. The boneyard smelled like creosote and cut weeds, and the particular sweetness of diesel, that has soaked into ground for decades. Sadie parked the Corolla at the bent place in the fence and walked in through waist-high chicory. And the closer she got to the bus, the more she understood the 11 minutes of silence at the auction. It wasn't just a wreck. It had the stillness of a place people had agreed to forget. Somebody had spray-painted a word on the side years ago, and somebody else had tried to scrub it off, and between the two of them all that was left was a gray smear, and underneath, painted careful and small beside the door, in a steady hand that had not been in a hurry, 4 words. Everybody rides. Nobody gets left. She stood and read that until the lights started to go. Then, she climbed the 3 steps into the bus, and the dark inside was cool and close and smelled of cracked vinyl and mouse and faintly of coffee, which made no sense at all. The seats ran back in 2 rows of green. The big mirror over the windshield was cracked in a spiderweb from one corner. And the destination sign above the front glass, the roller you crank by hand to say where a bus is going, had been wound to 2 words and left there. Out of service. That was when the light came on. Down the aisle on the left, 4 seats back, an amber marker lamp glowed to life all by itself, soft as a struck match, and Sadie's whole body went cold and still the way an animal goes still. She was not a girl who scared easy. She had slept in worse dark than this, in places with locks on the outside of the door. But a light coming on in a dead bus is a thing your body answers before your mind can talk it down. And then from somewhere behind her, quiet and unmistakable and human, she heard a child laugh. She did not run. That is the first thing you should know about Sadie Rourke. She had learned that the things worth being afraid of don't laugh, and the things that laugh are usually more frightened of you than you are of them. So she stood in the aisle of her $11 bus, with her heart going, and she said, to the dark, in the flat, even voice she used on caseworkers, "I know you're in here. I bought this bus today. I'm not going to hurt you and I'm not going to call anybody. But I'm not leaving either. So we might as well talk." For a long time, nothing answered but the wind moving through the broken window seals. A low, hollow moan, the curved metal roof, turned into something that could pass, if you were frightened and wanted to be, for voices. Then a shape unfolded from the back bench, tall and thin and hunched, a boy about her own age in a hooded sweatshirt, gone gray with washing and no washing, and he stood at the back of the aisle with his hands loose at his sides like someone who has been braced to be told to leave his whole life. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "Neither are you," said Sadie. "Where's the kid?" "What kid?" "The one laughing." The boy's face did something complicated. He reached into the pocket of the sweatshirt and pulled out a little handheld cassette player, the cheap kind, and he pressed a button, and out of the tinny speaker came a wash of children's voices, a dozen of them, singing something ragged and joyful, and under it a man's low voice keeping the tune, and then all of them cracking up at the same wrong note. He clicked it off. "It's a tape," he said. "That's all it ever was. A tape." His name was Toby. He was 18. He told her over the next hour, sitting on the cold vinyl while the real dark came down, been sleeping in this bus off and on since the state let go of him in the spring, because it was the only place in the world where he had ever felt like he was somebody's. And the man on the tape, the one keeping the tune, was Ray Bishop, who had driven Route 7 for 30 years, and who was, in every way that had ever mattered to Toby, the closest thing to a father he had ever had. "They told me he was drunk," Sadie said. "The lady at the county." Toby laughed, and there was no laughing in it. "Yeah," he said. "They tell everybody that." He looked down the aisle to the seat where the amber lamp still glowed, 4 back on the left. "That's my seat." Was my seat. I was on this bus, I was 9 years old, and I was sitting right there the day Eli died, and I have been trying to tell people what really happened for 9 years, and not one grown person in this town has ever once believed a single word I said. His jaw worked. "But there's a box. Mr. Ray showed me a box. He said if the truth ever mattered to anybody, it'd be in the box." He wiped his face with the heel of his hand. "You want to know what's in this bus that scared a whole town? It ain't a ghost. It's the box. Before we open it with them, do me one favor. If you've made it this far and you're feeling what Sadie's feeling, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what town you're watching from, because what's inside that box is the entire reason this story exists. Now let's open it." The box was welded. That was the first thing that told Sadie the man had meant it to last. It sat bolted to the frame under the driver's seat, a gray steel toolbox the size of a bread loaf, and the seat had to come up on its hinge and the whole bench folded forward before you could even see it, and then it needed a key, and Toby knew where the key was because Ray had told him. Taped up under the fare box where a boy could reach and a careless grown hand would never think to. Inside was no money. Sadie had let herself hope, the way you do, and there was no money, and in a way what was in there was worth more and worth nothing at all, depending on who you asked. There was a coffee can, empty, with a strip of masking tape on the side and one line in pencil. Coats bought, see the book. There was an older cassette deck, wired by hand into a small battery, its buttons worn pale. There was a shoebox of tapes labeled by year. There was a stack of yellow carbon copy forms, soft as cloth from handling, held with a rubber band that snapped to dust when she touched it. And there was a book, a composition book, the marbled black and white kind you buy for $1 for school. And on the front in that same unhurried hand it said, The Root. She opened it under the amber light, and Ray Bishop's 30 years opened with it. It was not a diary. Ray was not a man of large feelings on paper. It was a list, a working list, kept the way a careful man keeps his tools, and every line was a child. Marcus D. Stop at the quarry road. No lunch again on Thursdays, his mama works a double. Keep the crackers up front. Dina W., scared of the big dog at the Halsey place. Started stopping 10 feet up so she don't have to walk past it. Costs me nothing. The Farrell twins, shoes gone through again. Left a pair in each cubby, no note, don't let on it was me. The Cade boy Eli, new on the route, little. Talks to everybody, sat him up front where I can see him. There were hundreds of them. Decades of them. Children whose names meant nothing to Sadie, and everything to the man who wrote them. A boy who needed shoes and got them, quietly, left in his cubby. A girl whose father was the kind of father you called somebody about, and Ray had called somebody, and then parked at her, stop an extra 2 minutes every morning after that, so she'd know that the bus, at least, would always come. Coats bought out of a coffee can he filled from a driver's wage that could not have been much. Not a dime of it written down as a debt. Not one line anywhere asking for a thing back. And then, 4 pages from the end, in handwriting that had started to shake, a line that stopped her cold. If it ever comes to it, the truth is in 2 places. This book and Alma has the rest. I sent her the copies. Whether she believes them is up to her. Make 2 so you're sure of 1. Sadie looked up. Who's Alma? Toby had gone very quiet. He was holding one of the yellow carbon forms up to the light, and his hands were not steady. Alma Cade, he said, Ellie's mother. He turned the form around so she could see it. It was a maintenance request, a driver's inspection report dated signed R. Bishop, and in the box for defects in Ray's plain block letters it said, rear brakes fading bad on grades. Third request, will not hold loaded, and stamped across the bottom in red the way a busy office stamps a thing it has decided not to think about. 1 word. Deferred. There were 9 of them, 9 requests. The oldest was 7 months before the crash. The last one was 11 days before. Here is what the town of Cane Hollow had believed, and had built into the shape of a settled fact. That on a wet October morning, Ray Bishop had come down the Dunmore grade too fast, with a full load of children. That he lost control on the switchback above the Slate Fork Gorge. That the bus went over onto its side against the uphill bank, and a second grader named Eli Cade died, and the county investigation, run by the transportation director, a careful and well-spoken man named Curtis Vane, had found the cause to be driver error. Excessive speed. There had been talk of alcohol that never made it into the report, but made it into every kitchen in the county, which is where verdicts really get handed down. Ray had kept his license by a thread and lost everything else. He was pulled off the route, then moved to the yard, then to nothing. He stopped coming to church because of how the pews cleared around him. And he died 2 years ago in a rented room with a bad heart and a worse reputation. And the bus that had been his life sat in the boneyard growing weeds, and the town told its children it was haunted so they'd stay clear of a thing the grown-ups couldn't stand to look at. Here is what the yellow form said. That the brakes had been failing for over half a year. That the man had begged in writing 9 times to have them fixed. That the answer, 9 times, had been a red stamp. Sadie sat with that under the amber light, and she understood something that made her sick and made her certain in the same breath. The story hadn't just been wrong. Somebody had needed it to be wrong. Because if Ray Bishop hadn't been drunk, if Ray Bishop hadn't been reckless, If the only thing Ray Bishop had done was drive the bus he was ordered to drive on the brakes the county refused to fix, then the blame didn't die with the driver. It went up the hill, to an office, to a man with a stamp. She sat with the book in her lap a long while, and she thought about the empty seat, 4 back on the left, and the marker light Ray had somehow kept burning over it, and she thought about every cubby she herself had ever emptied when a placement ended, every duffel bag, every door that closed soft behind her while somebody looked at the floor. She had spent 19 years being the kid nobody wrote down. And here was a man who had written down everybody. "We have to find Alma Cade," she said. "She won't talk to me," Toby said. "She won't talk to anybody about it. She's the one leaves the flowers." Sadie hadn't told him about the flowers, but she'd seen them that first evening, wilted wild asters laid on the hood in a jar with an inch of water, and she'd assumed they were his, some grief he was tending. They weren't. For 9 years, the mother of the dead boy had been driving out to the boneyard and leaving flowers on the bus that everyone said had killed her son. And that did not fit the town's story at all. Grief like that doesn't tend the thing it hates. It tends the thing it can't stop loving, or the thing it isn't sure it should have hated in the first place. They had 6 days to move a bus that couldn't move, and no money to move it, and a stack of yellow paper that could be the most important thing in Loudoun County, or a dead man's excuse, depending on who believed it. So Sadie did the only thing she'd ever known how to do when the ground was falling away. She got up early, and she went to find the people whose names were in the book. Marcus from the Quarry Road was 31 now, and gone to Knoxville. But Dina, the girl who'd been afraid of the Halsey dog, had grown into a labor and delivery nurse at the county hospital, and she came out on her lunch break in scrubs and stood looking at the bus a while before she could say anything at all. "He'd stopped 10 feet early," she finally said, "so I wouldn't have to walk past that dog. I never told him I was scared. He just knew." She pressed her lips together. "I went into nursing because of a note he left in my cubby in the 8th grade. It said, 'You pay attention to people.' That's a whole job if you want it. I still have it." She looked at Sadie. "What do you need?" What Sadie needed was a diesel mechanic and a tow, and Dina knew one of each, because the man who kept the hospital's generators running was named Reggie, and Reggie had ridden Route 7 too, back when his family lost the trailer, and he was living 3 to a bed at his aunt's. And Ray had kept crackers up front for exactly that reason and never once made him ask. Reggie came out that evening with a work light and a jug of diesel and a fresh battery, and he lay on his back in the weeds under the front of the bus for 2 hours while Toby held the light and Sadie handed down tools, and around 10 o'clock he crawled out black to the elbows and said, "The old girl's got compression yet. If the fuel didn't turn to varnish, she'll turn over. It ain't the engine that killed anybody on this bus, and everybody in this county knows it, and nobody will say it." He wiped his face and left a streak. "You really got his book?" Sadie showed him. He read 3 pages standing up in the dark and had to stop. "He wrote me down," Reggie said low. "Reggie, keep the crackers up. That's all it says. I've been 40 years old thinking maybe I imagined him. Thinking maybe I made him kinder than he was because I needed him to be." He closed the book careful as a Bible. "We're getting this bus running, and we're getting that woman to talk." The amber light was on again in the window behind them. Reggie glanced at it, and for the first time he wasn't spooked. He walked around the back and shone his light up under the roofline and grunted. "There it is," he said. "Little solar panel zip-tied to the roof feeds that marker lamp through a dusk sensor. And that old deck in the box is wired to the same battery. The auto reverse in it is worn plumb out. So on a warm night when that battery tops off, the thing clicks itself on, plays a few seconds of them kids and quits." He shook his head slowly. "That's your haunting. That's the whole of it. A little sun, a tired battery, and a man who loved this bus so much he wouldn't even let it go dark after they took it away from him. Been doing it out here for years, long before this boy ever slept a single night in it. Folks drive the ridge, they see a light and hear children, and they decide it's a ghost. It's easier than deciding it's a good man they done wrong. That is when the good-looking car came up the boneyard road. It was a clean gray SUV, the kind that cost more than the bus and more than anyone at that auction had made in a year, and it came slow through the weeds and stopped, and a man got out in pressed khakis and a quarter zip with a little logo stitched over the heart. Loudoun County, vein for commission. He was somewhere in his 60s, silver and fit, with the easy, sorrowful face of a man who has practiced being sorry. "You'd be the young lady who bought the bus," Curtis Vane said, and his voice was warm and low and full of care. "I hope you'll forgive me tracking you down. Doreen mentioned somebody finally took lot 41 off our hands, and I'll be honest, my heart just about broke. This old thing." He looked at the bus like a man looking at a grave. "This is a hard piece of history for a lot of folks. There's a mother in this town who has never gotten over what happened here. Every year around the anniversary it comes up again in the paper and opens the wound right back up, for her and for everybody." He turned that sorrowful face on Sadie. "I'd like to buy it from you, give it a dignified end. Haul it off to the scrapper myself, so nobody has to keep driving past it. And I'd like to pay you $3,000 for your trouble." $3,000. Sadie had $6.30. $3,000 was a deposit and a first month and a second month. A real door with her own key in it. An end to the heater she had to hit to make work. $3,000 was everything she had wanted her entire life. Offered by a kind-faced man in a clean car, and all she had to do was let him take the bus to the crusher. And she stood in the weeds and understood, the way you understand a cold snap coming, exactly why he wanted it. "The anniversary's next week," she said. "Isn't it? 9 years?" "It is," Vane said gently. "And you've got a candlelight thing at the school. For your campaign. Safety and savings, it says on your signs." She had seen them coming into town, staked along the road, and the words had meant nothing to her then and meant everything now. Savings. "You were the transportation director 9 years ago. You ran the investigation on your own department." The warmth on his face didn't drop so much as harden, a pond going to ice. "I ran a thorough and heartbreaking investigation into an accident," he said. "That was caused by a driver who is no longer here to be hurt by any of this. Which is exactly why a smart girl would take $3,000 and let a dead man rest." "He wasn't drunk," Sadie said. "He filed 9 reports on those brakes. You stamped them deferred. You cut the maintenance budget, and you deferred the brakes, and when the brakes failed, you put it on him, because a dead driver can't file a grievance, and a gutted budget can." Her voice did not shake, and she was proud of that later, because everything else in her was shaking. "That's what's in this bus, Mr. Vane. That's your ghost." For a moment, nobody said anything. The wind came through the seals and moaned in the roof. Then Curtis Vane smiled, and it was not a nice smile, and he said very quietly, "You have 5 days to remove county property from a county lot. It says so on your paper. If it's not gone by Friday, it reverts, and it goes to the scrapper on Monday with everything else. And there is not one thing you can do about it. No judge in this county is going to hear a homeless girl and a foster kid over a man who has given 40 years to this community." He got back in his clean car. Through the window, he said, still gentle, "Offers good till Friday. After that, it's just $1 a day storage I'll be billing you. And you don't have $1, do you, sweetheart?" He backed the SUV through the weeds and was gone. And Toby said in a small voice, "He's right, we can't get it running and towed and titled and off the lot by Friday with no money. He'll just wait us out." "No," Sadie said. She was watching the amber light. "He won't, because we're not going to move the bus." She turned to them, and something had settled in her face that Reggie would describe later as the look of somebody who has finally stopped being afraid of the wrong things. "We're going to move the town. Before I tell you what she did, and I promise you it is not what you're expecting, this is the part of the story I have been waiting to get to. So stay with me, because everything Curtis Vane just said was true. She had 5 days, no money, no standing, and a story nobody had ever believed. He had every advantage a man can have. He had just made exactly one mistake now. Back to Sadie, Ray Bishop had written, "Make 2 so you're sure of 1. He had been a man who understood that a truth kept in a single place is a truth you can crush on a Monday and bill for by the day. So he had made 2. The book was in the bus. The other copy he'd written was with Alma, and the reason Sadie was not going to move the bus was this. A bus in a boneyard is a thing you can ignore, but a bus rolling onto a school lawn at a candlelight vigil on the 9th anniversary in front of the whole town and a man asking them all to vote for savings is a thing you have to look at. She went to see Alma Cade alone on the 4th day because some doors only open for one person at a time. Alma lived in a small clean house at the end of a gravel lane, a wind chime on the porch, and a garden gone mostly to asters, the same wild asters that had been sitting in a jar on the hood of the bus. She was a woman of about 50 gray, coming in at her temples, and a stillness to her that Sadie recognized on sight, because it was her own stillness. The stillness of a person who has learned to hold something very heavy without letting anyone see the strain. "I know who you are," Alma said from behind the screen door. "The whole town knows by now. The girl who bought the bus. She didn't open the door. Why are you here?" "Because Ray Bishop said you had the truth," Sadie said. "And I think you've been leaving flowers on that bus for 9 years, because you already know he did." The stillness on Alma Cade's face broke, just at the edges, the way ice breaks at the rim of a pond in a thaw. She opened the door. On the kitchen table, when it finally came out, was a manila envelope, soft with age, and in it were the copies. The same 9 yellow forms, and a letter in Ray's hand that he had mailed her a month after the crash, a month after the town decided he was a killer. It was the only thing she would let Sadie read aloud later, at the vigil, because she could not read it herself without coming apart. "Mrs. Cade, I am not going to ask you to forgive me, because I don't know that I can forgive myself, and it isn't the same thing anyway. But I need you to have these, in case a day comes when it matters, because they will try to lose the ones in the office, and I don't trust that they won't lose me too. I reported those breaks 9 times. On the grade that morning I felt them go, and I had a choice between the bank and the gorge, and I put us in the bank, because the bank was survival for 11 of your neighbor's children, and I will go to my grave knowing it was not survival for the 12th. I would have traded my life for his. I have wished every day since that God had taken that trade. He was the one up front where I could see him. He talked to everybody. I keep the seat empty. Everybody rides, Mrs. Cade. Nobody gets left. I broke my own rule and it will never stop costing me. If you ever choose to use these, use them. If you choose to burn them, I understand that too. R. Bishop. Alma had not burned them. She had not used them either. She had spent 9 years in the impossible country between, unable to forgive the man and unable to blame him, hating the bus and tending it, and the reason, she told Sadie in the kitchen with both their hands wrapped around cold coffee, was the simplest and hardest reason there is. If it wasn't Ray's fault, Alma said, then somebody made a choice that killed my boy to save some money. And I did not know how to live in a world where that was true. It was easier to be mad at a dead man than to be right about a live one. She looked up, and her eyes were dry now and terrible and clear. You said it's next week, the vigil. Thursday, Sadie said. He'll stand up there and ask them to vote for him on savings. Alma Cade stood up from her table. Then we are going to bring the bus, she said. They did not fix the whole bus in 4 days. That would have been a lie, and this is not a story that needs any more of those. What Reggie did, working 2 nights straight with Dina holding the light and Toby handing tools and half the names from the book, Nuksh, as word went around the county, was get the engine to turn over and the air brakes to build and hold on the flat, enough to limp it, at 10 miles an hour with a chase truck riding its bumper, the 6 miles from the boneyard to the school. Sadie titled it in her own name at the county clerk's window, with Doreen stamping the paper and not quite meeting her eyes, and then at the very end meeting them and saying low, Ray kept crackers up front for my sister's kids. I always wondered. And stamping it again, harder than she needed to. They drove it out of the boneyard on Wednesday night, and the amber marker lamp glowed the whole way, and it did not look haunted anymore. It looked like exactly what it was, an old bus a great many people had loved coming back into service. The vigil was on the school lawn at dusk, folding tables and paper cups and a little PA, and Curtis Vane at the microphone in a dark suit with a black ribbon on the lapel, and it was going the way it had gone for 9 years, sorrow and savings, a moment of silence, and then a soft word about the tough choices leadership requires when the headlights came up the drive and the long yellow shape came behind them, and the whole lawn turned to look at Route 7 rolling onto the grass with its destination sign, lit. It no longer said out of service. Toby had cranked the roller on the drive over, all the way around. In service, Vane recovered fast, you had to give him that. He kept his voice warm into the mic even as his eyes went flat. Well, he said, it appears we have a. And Alma Cade walked up onto the little riser and took the microphone out of his hand. She did not shout. That is what people remembered afterward. Eli's mother, who had not spoken her son's name in public in 9 years, stood in front of the whole town and read Ray Bishop's letter in a voice that never rose above the one you'd use at a kitchen table. And when she reached the part about the 12th child, the lawn made a sound like a held breath letting go. Then Dina, the nurse, read 3 of the 9 yellow forms, dates and defects and the red stamp, deferred, deferred, deferred. Then Reggie, who had raised a dead bus in 2 nights, held up the composition book and said, "His name is in here. And so is mine. And so are about 200 of yours, and every one of them is a kindness he never once told a soul about. This town called him a drunk. This town called this bus haunted so its own kids would stay away from the proof. There is your ghost." And he set the book down on the podium, gentle, like it was sleeping. And Sadie, last, stepped up not to accuse but to explain, because she had learned young that the truth doesn't need a raised voice, it needs a clear one. She held up the last yellow form, the one from 11 days before the crash. She said the budget for keeping those buses safe had been cut by the same office that ordered them to keep running. She said a man had begged, 9 times in writing. She said the man who stamped those forms was standing right there, asking them to vote for savings. And that this bus, this book, this mother, this boy in the 3rd seat who had been telling the truth since he was 9 years old and had never once been believed, this was what savings had bought. Curtis Vane did not survive that lawn. Not in the way that matters. There was no dramatic confession, because men like Vane don't confess. They go quiet and they lawyer up, and he did. But within the week the state had the copies and had reopened what it had let close, and the yellow forms were exactly as damning in an official file as they had been in a welded box. Which is the whole reason a careful man makes 2. The commission race was over before it began. The paper that had run driver error for 9 years ran Ray Bishop's name again on the front page, spelled right, under a headline that finally told the truth. It was too late to matter to Ray, and that is the part that is true and does not tie up in a bow, because some justice arrives after the man it belonged to is already in the ground. And honest stories say so out loud. But it mattered to Alma. She told Sadie, weeks later, that the night of the vigil was the first night in 9 years she had slept without the weight, because his being right about a live man turned out to be survivable after all, when she's wasn't carrying it alone. Here is how it ended, which is really how it began. Sadie did not get rich. There was no reward, no envelope of bills behind a panel, no long-lost account with her name on it. Those things happen in stories people write to make you feel better about a world that mostly doesn't work that way. And this is not that kind of story. What Sadie got was the bus, free and clear, an old blue bird with tired brakes and a book full of a dead man's kindness, and a boy in the 3rd seat who had at last been heard. What she did with them is the answer to why the bus exists at all. Reggie fixed the brakes, really fixed them, the way they should have been fixed a decade ago, and would not take a dime. Dina helped her get the paperwork through the county to run the bus not as a school bus, but as the thing it became, which was something this county had no word for, and had needed for a very long time. 3 mornings a week, before school, Route 7 runs again. Up the quarry road and out past the Halsey place and along the ridgeline to the far hollows where the poorest kids in Loudoun County live too far out for the regular bus and too broke for anything else. There's a hot plate and a cooler bolted up front. There are crackers up front, always, so no child ever has to ask. There's a coffee can, and the town fills it now, because the town finally knows what it's for. And there's a seat, 4 back on the left, that stays empty, with a little brass plate Alma had made. It says, "This seat is Eli's. Everybody rides. Toby drives it. He got his license, the real kind, the commercial kind, tested by an examiner who had ridden Route 7 as a girl and cried a little in the parking lot afterward and blamed it on the pollen. He lives in a small apartment now, with a door and his own key. But most mornings you'll find him at the bus before dawn, checking the brakes, the way Ray taught a 9-year-old to do it, back when nobody else in the world was checking anything for either of them." And Sadie. Sadie sits up front some mornings, in the driver's seat that is hers now, and she keeps the book. She has added to it, her own hand, under 30 years of Ray's, the same working list, the same no note, the same nobody owes anybody anything. A kid who needs shoes. A girl scared to walk past a dog, a little one who talks to everybody, sat up front where she can see him. At the bottom of the last page Ray ever wrote, under the line about making 2 copies so you're sure of one, she added, A line of her own the first morning the bus ran again, and she reads it to herself sometimes when the far hollows are still dark, and the amber light is on, and the ridge is coming up gold in the east. The light was never a ghost. It was a man who couldn't stop keeping it on for the next kid down the road. Now it's mine to keep. Everybody rides, nobody gets left. She cranks the destination roller before she pulls out, every single morning. Passed out of service, all the way around, to in service, so that anyone on the ridge road who happens to look down and see the old yellow bus moving through the dark will know exactly what they are looking at. Not a haunting, a promise, kept by whoever is willing to keep it. If this story moved you, do the thing that keeps stories like it alive. Subscribe and share it with one person who needs to hear that being unseen is not the same as being worthless. And tell us in the comments, who was your Ray Bishop? Who kept the light on for you when nobody was supposed to be watching? We read everyone. See you on the next road.